I'm just noticing that a lot of the questions are how questions. How could we do this? How could we do that? And there are some specific answers that I would like to give, but there's a general answer. Because unfortunately in this thing there's no magic bullets. There's kind of one general orientation that I think we have that our current union leadership does not have, and that is about organizing the members to be able to act at the school level in their own interests. We need to have strong chapters where when something happens that shouldn't be happening, if it's happening to a child, if it's happening to a parent, or if it's happening to a teacher, the union can react. Where people know and trust each other and have a whole bunch of conversations about how they feel about different things so that all views can be aired. We don't even have discussion in most union chapters. So your conservative teachers, your teachers with fears and doubts, they're right to have fears and doubts. They're absolutely right to have fears and doubts, but there's no forum where those fears and doubts can be aired and addressed. So I think the first thing that we absolutely have to do is organize every single chapter. Meet, discuss. It's not just that like we have a magic bullet that will solve everything, although I think we need to say to people, we want to organize at the school-based level. We want to build a genuine movement of rank and file educators. We want a member-driven union that's way more democratic. We don't believe that union leaders should have, you know, way north of six-figure salaries when teachers, when teachers are getting hammered. Like the Chicago Teachers Union officers, they pay themselves what teachers get. They have way more democracy and keep themselves closer to the membership. So if the members get a bad contract, they feel the pain. And I believe that, and they did that to themselves when they came in office. That was one of their campaign promises. We have to have that same kind of a culture of like, we are the union. I went to a union rally once that the UFT organized downtown, one of these big rallies. My district rep thanked me for coming. I was like, why are you, I'm here to fight for myself. Why are you thanking me? They have this idea that the union is their property. They own it. And it's like if you show up to their, you know, this is just their stage show. No, the union should be what we make it at every chapter level, but that requires a lot of discussion to get from where we are to where we need to be, and it requires a lot of organizing. On the racial piece, I really believe that this is not just a matter of rhetoric, although I think Moore's rhetoric is good. That is, we're calling out the school-to-prison pipeline. We're calling out the ways in which institutional racism is now moving into the schools, or I shouldn't say now moving into this, is in the schools and is connected to dynamics in the wider society. The Chicago Teachers Union does the same thing. It calls out straight up apartheid schools. Which schools have libraries? Which schools have the arts? Which schools have music programs? Which schools have after-school programs? Which schools have science labs? I mean, we can make the exact same case in New York and take that straight to the public and win a lot of friends and a lot of solidarity. But more than that, we ultimately, it has to be proven in practice. No matter what we say, however fine our words, ultimately, parents have to know that when they fight back, they have a powerful organization, beginning with the teachers that they know and look in the eye every day. They have a powerful organization that will absolutely have their back. If they want to occupy a school because it's being closed and they want to physically sit, they know instinctively that we will be there with them. We just don't have that feeling right now, and that can only be built up through struggle. And I believe that's what is going to be required to really heal this rift. It's got to be healed in practice. So, okay, failing schools. I went to a failing school hearing just 2 nights ago in Harlem, and I'm ashamed to say the union was clearly not lifting a finger to save this school. District rep got up and spoke, but I mean, that was it. There was no organization. More, which has considerably fewer resources than the UFT, showed up with posters, made signs, helped other people make signs, had a leaflet about school closings, why they're closing all of the schools. Some of the teachers had comments from the students that the students had written. They handed them to more members, so the teachers read them out. We, who weren't even teachers at that school, read them out. And it was like we tried to do something to protest this. And you know, we've tried to have subsequent follow-up conversations with them about how do you begin to organize to really fight the school closings. You just don't get the feeling when you go into schools that the union has an organizing bone in its body. They don't. They're a highly bureaucratic operation, you know, that might deliver you dental care, but when you're in a crisis, when you're in a fight, they have no idea how to fight. And really they're afraid, I believe, of an organized membership. I heard somebody say in the delegate assembly once, most unions try to scare the boss with a strike. Our union tries to scare the workers with a strike. They use the idea of a strike to scare teachers. We believe, yes, we cannot just go around yelling strike, strike, strike. But we have to begin a process of discussion at the chapter level where teachers can talk about these things, can prepare. The Chicago Teachers Union strike did not come out of nowhere. They spent 2 years preparing in advance for that kind of a confrontation. We have to be, I mean, in New York it's illegal for us to go on strike. So our level of preparation for that kind of a confrontation would have to be even more detailed and involved. But we can't, I believe ultimately it's not just about getting elected into union office, as much as that is a goal of ours, and we really need to do that ultimately. But if we don't have a powerful movement at the chapter level, even elected to office, we could not run the union the way we want to run it. So we really have to see this. If you're talking to your coworkers, it's not just vote for us. I mean, although we do want them to vote for us, but it's also, what do you think are the problems in this school? What do you think it would take for us to solve them? How could we begin to get more organized? When the working conditions are horrible, how can we enforce the contract that we have? How can we insist on that? How can we stick together over issues that teachers care about in the building? So it's really a vision of mobilizing and organizing people. I think I've said that like a zillion times now. At the school level. I believe that is where our strength is ultimately going to lie. That's how we're going to make real alliances with community, and that's how we're going to beat back corporate education reform. Thank you.
I'm going to try to hit a few birds with a couple of stones, and also tie together what Julie, Brian, and Camille have said. I'm going to start out with what you mentioned, because it is very important, because we are, the dilemmas we face and the literally catastrophic situation that we face as public educators, and it is not an exaggeration, it is not hyperbole, to actually speak about what is happening in public education in this country today as an ongoing catastrophe in the making. It is embedded in a history, and there are kind of deep tectonic plates underneath us. And one of those deep structures is a union that, you know, if you think about, and again, you know, and again, this is addressing some of the questions about, well, how do I bring this up with my members? Well, one way to do it, because we are, you know, the membership is young, and many of our members have grown up in a time when unions have been in decline, and they don't really know what a union is. They don't know labor history, which is a very dramatic and noble one in the United States, as well as a very violent one. They don't know labor history. They don't know the sacrifices and the struggles that gave them weekends and vacations and pensions and health benefits and things like that. And the members do need to be educated. But at any rate, one of the things about these deeper structures is our union. And when you're explaining the union and when you're explaining the election to your members, one of the ways to do it is, you know, they hear about caucuses, they may not be sure what that means, and you can just explain it in terms of, well, you know, the union is, think of the union as a government, and the caucuses are political parties running to control that government. And this particular government has been controlled by a one-party state for over 50 years. 50 years. Now, even the most well-intentioned institutions start to go stale after 50 years. And that's what we're seeing now. I mean, we've been seeing it actually for decades, but it's now reached a point where it's actually reaching into the classroom and grabbing us by the throats, and grabbing our kids, our students, by the throats. Now, it's an irony, it's an interesting irony, and this is also going back to what Julie and Brian said. It's a very interesting irony about the history of the United Federation of Teachers and the leadership of the United Federation of Teachers, the Unity Caucus, which is the leadership caucus, the leadership political party. All right, so Michael Mulgrew is the head of the Unity Caucus, the Unity political party that the Moore Caucus is seeking to unseat. And the Unity Caucus, much of its history was actually based on fighting and driving leftists and communists out of the teachers' union, and in particular members of the Communist Party. And the great irony is that though they spent, and Albert Shanker being, you know, one of the main people about this, who was a brilliant trade unionist and a brilliant man, and whose advances for the union we are still benefiting from. But he's a very complicated figure, so but granting him all of that. But the irony is that he helped build the union by driving the communists out of the union, and in fact the United Federation of Teachers, the leadership actually runs in many ways much like the Communist Party. in that it's a very centralized structure. It is a top-down structure where information and power does not flow up from the bottom, but flows out from the top. And of course, we all know what happened to the communist parties in most of the world. All right? And the atrophying of democracy in the UFT is representative, and it's of a piece with the atrophying of democracy that we see around us in this country right now. As for how are we going to improve the working conditions, and how are we going to speak to maybe more conservative members, I would say one way for us to conceptualize that is to think in terms of there's inside organizing and there's outside organizing. There's the inside organizing of us working in our schools and building our chapters, as Brian said. And in terms of approaching more conservative members, it's like with our kids and it's like with our students. You go where they are. You start where they are. And as organizers and union members, we have to start where the membership is, wherever that might be, whatever their level of political sophistication or union sophistication, all right? But they all have issues, and they're all going to have grievances that they want remedied. And you'll find that each particular department has its own issues. So the teachers have their individual issues, the departments tend to have their individual issues. All right, so again, one thing, how do you build a chapter, just on a very practical level? Well, you may not get anything done, but as union members, you have a right to have what's called a consultative committee. The principal is obliged to meet with this committee. The union sets the agenda of this meeting. Now you can have representatives from each department in the school. I once was the chapter leader at my school, I no longer am, but we have on the consultative committee, there's representatives of each department. English is there, the largest department in my school, since we're an ESL school, is English. But every department is represented there, and this is not just a way of trying to remedy things with the principal, most of which are not are not really done in an many of which are not done in an antagonistic way, and they're kind of mundane things that you talk about. But it gives teachers a voice, and it gives them day-to-day experience in working together, and it also gives them an opportunity to see how even some small gains can be made. So in terms of approaching members, may not have that much union background, may not have that much union consciousness, may not have that much political sophistication. Go to where they are, find out what their issues are, and try to develop a collective way of addressing them. All right? And that's what bottom-up unionism and bottom-up democracy is. And then as far as, well, how do we, the young person who was here asked about improving working conditions. Well, that process of organizing is a step. That's the internal organizing, strengthening yourself within the chapter. There's the external organizing of going out into the communities and showing the links between what our issues are and the issues of the communities that we serve. And I may sound very petty. I mean, this really isn't the place to get into nuts and bolts about this thing. Call me a petty and vindictive person, but you know what? There's a lot of sociopathic principles out there. Some of you might have even had experience with it. And the system itself is sociopathic, and it rewards pathology. The system rewards pathology. I think all of us can probably recount from our own experience the way that works. And so one fantasy is, and again, call me petty and vindictive, maybe I am, but I have a fantasy of when Moore's in power, we sort of have a crush a principal every couple of months, crush a psychopathic principal a month. And so that we set up some object lessons where we have a well-organized chapter, and if there is an abusive principal, we set them straight publicly. And that message gets sent down the line, both to Tweed and among the principals themselves. Most of these principals, many of them, I won't say most, many of them, they're opportunistic, many of them are cowardly. And if they see that there's a price to be paid for the abuse that they are heaping on their teachers, that will do something.
Question, please.
More. So, what we're going to do for the rest of the meeting, so it's 7:30 now, we're going to let you guys continue to meet the candidates, right? So we'll kind of put the